My presentation will be looking at the critical issues that are raised and concerned with the representation of sexual violence in news reporting. This presentation will focus mainly on the sexual violence towards children. However, I'm aware and we cannot ignore sexual violence issues and stories with the victim being female, or stories involving a male victim and the issues these incidents also raise. The presentation will look at the main ideas and issues that were explored throughout my essay, looking at the significant historical examples that helped raise sexual child abuse into public discussion and the outcome and effect these examples had on the whole of society. Many issues are considered with the representation of sexual violence in news reporting, especially involving children. News reports and journalists need to make sure that the victim's identity is hidden when necessary and that all victims are protected. Child sex abuse cases involving a female offender generally receive more news coverage. Victims in these cases are often pushed to the back with no consideration, and journalists tend to focus on the female offender. This was seen throughout the cases involving Rosemary West. News reports focused on Rose herself and horrific crimes that she had committed, rather than representing the young victims themselves and giving them the support or justice. Traditional stereotypical views see women as the main childcare provider, who are compassionate and caring, so when such offences are committed by women, journalists use this to create a shocking story, increasing sales and restoring little faith into society's care providers and family role models. Child abuse victims are not the only victims journalists fail to represent. Journalists also fail to recognise male victims. Male victims are often ignored by both journalists and the police, and therefore this does little to raise awareness of these crimes to the general public. Although there has been an increase in recent years in the number of sexual violence stories that are represented in news reports in cases which are reported to the police, victims are still failing and finding it hard to speak up and report the incident. This may be for many reasons. One, that they are too ashamed to talk about what happened, especially cases involving incest, or victims may be too young to speak up and tell anyone, seen in cases such as Baby P. Society needs to recognise all victims and ensure everyone has access to report crime. Society needs to be aware of those most vulnerable and ensure that their incidents are not ignored or discovered too late. It's important to consider Sarah's Law when looking at the representation of sexual violence in news reporting, as Sarah's Law derived from a large media campaign. Sarah's Just Child herself was used sexually abused and violently murdered by a convicted paedophile. Sarah's Law is also known as the Child Sex Offender Disclosure Scheme, and this scheme allows anyone caring for a child to apply for the records relating to child sex offences. This scheme came into force in the UK in 2011 and highlights how powerful the media can be. Sarah's story and law also caused a moral panic in society after the News of the World's naming and shaming campaign had to be shut down. Although this caused innocent people to become victims of crime, as they were targeted and attacked by individuals who believed they were convicted of child sexual offences, it also helped historical cases to be reported to the police. This was a shock to society, as many historic child sex abuse cases that had only just beginning to become reported and known to society involved celebrities, individuals who we often look up to and those who inspire us. However, although these incidents occurred many years ago, this finally allowed some victims to receive the justice they deserve, but it does, however, highlight how we can no longer trust anyone within society, and that the media will happily report past events, especially involving well-known individuals, to grab society's attention and increase profits. A loss of trust is also seen throughout the case of Baby P. Baby P was ultimately killed by his own mother and stepfather, and this emphasises that society can no longer trust anyone, even those closest to you. The media, however, focused news reports on the professionals who failed to recognise child abuse and neglect at various points during Baby P's short life, and this made society turn a blind eye on the actual offenders themselves. This again highlights issues with the representation of sexual violence in news reporting and shows the impact the media can have on society. The media itself was able to point a finger on who they believed was responsible for this case, and shows how the media has the ability to make substantial claims and suggest that the real issues of child sex abuse are still going unrecognised. Rose and Fred West sexually abused and murdered innocent women, including their own children. The representation of this sexual violence in news reports caused society to react to offenders, especially Rose, as she deviated against traditional roles. However, news reports fail to report and explain the underlying reasons behind this type of crime. Research shows that both Rose and Fred came from deprived backgrounds and poor upbringing, and incest was seen as a normal thing within the family. This suggests that news reports do not consider the reasons or motives behind the offender's actions, and although horrific crimes are committed, society is still unaware of the reasons behind sexual violence. On the other hand, this may be denial from society, that they do not believe sexual violence towards children still happens and takes part in a modern society, and believe biological or social issues are no excuse for such behaviour. Sexual violence can also be seen through cyberbullying. This can include the transfer of rude messages or photos, harassment and posting or sending pictures that may potentially harm or embarrass someone. Cyberbullying is a form of hate crime that is still unrecognised, and individuals still fail to see the potential dangers that it may arise. News reports often avoid stories linked to cybercrime, but it is one that should not be ignored. Social media has increased in recent years and has become part of modern life, with many checking social media as soon as they wake up. 2/3 of UK adults now own a smartphone, which allows quick, easy access to the internet at any time and in any location. Social media does not create sexual violence itself, but the increasing use by children makes it easy for online groomers to chat, exchange pictures, or potentially arrange to meet up. This raises huge questions to how safe the internet is and what websites and online organisations are doing to ensure all individuals are safe while online. To reduce online sexual violence that involves children, parents, schools and the government need to work alongside the internet and particular social media websites to ensure children know the harms and risks of online sexual gratification and that parents are aware of what their children are doing whilst online. Websites and parents need to make sure safety measures are put in place to reduce online groomers gaining access. This will hopefully reduce sexual violence crime rates in the near future. News reports should be beneficial as they are easily accessed by all individuals. The media has the power and ability to present any stories they like. The media should use this power in a positive way rather than a negative way to ensure the public benefit from news reporting and that news reports can be used as a source of information by everyone in society. Although the media forces sexual violence, especially when involving children, into public discussion, we cannot ignore those who are wrongly accused, yet innocent, and the issues this may cause. The media needs to be careful in how they represent sexual violence in news reporting and should carefully consider what is to be represented within the media. This is because sexual violence involving any victim is a very sensitive issue and one readers normally feel empathy towards. However, it's one that should be closely looked at to ensure the protection of victims is maintained, and it may also help victims of sexual violence to receive the justice that they deserve. Another benefit of forcing sexual violence stories into the media is that it may help to ensure that the offender receives the correct punishment, suitable for the horrific crime that has been committed. Journalists should be considerate and careful when reporting sexual child abuses to protect their identity and ensure that victims are not affected physically or emotionally by the retelling of the incident. In the future, the media, government, parents and all those involved or in contact with children need to work with one another to help minimise this crime in the near future. Children are vulnerable individuals and need to be protected and safe at all times, and all individuals in society are responsible for this and need to make sure this is their main priority.